Hello and welcome to our 21st Living History Day here at the Wood County Museum. My name is Annette Wells and I'm the director. Just a few housekeeping things before we get started. If you brought your cell phone, please turn the ringer to silent. And you are welcome to take photographs during the program if you'd like. If you want to tag the museum on social media, you can use hashtag Wood County Museum. Our main buildings are open for restrooms, or if you just need to cool off in the AC today. And also the exhibits are open. You can go through the front entrance here, the enclosed porch, or with mobility issues, you are certainly welcome to go up the ramp right here and push the button and the door will swing open, and there's restrooms right inside the door there on the left. Our info tent over here by the archway has bottled water, a few loose leaf teas that we brewed this morning, and there's also a cookie tray over there if you would like refreshments. Just a couple of announcements for events that are coming up. We do have one more Music at the Museum concert. It is going to be Thursday night, September 19th from 6 to 9 p.m. Bring a lawn chair and there'll be food trucks there and you can listen to 3 local bands. That's our last concert on the porch this summer, September 19th. Also at that concert, we will be drawing our 50-50 winner. We still have tickets available. Right now, the pot sits at the winner getting $900, so it's growing quite nicely. So if you'd like some 50-50 tickets, they have them over at the pop-up tent. You do not need to be present to win at that last concert. We'd like to thank our sponsors, DACOR Internet Services, the Portage Center Arbor, number 524 Gleaners, Edwin and Irma Wolf, the North Baltimore Arbor, number 461 Gleaners, the Wood County Geological Society. Genealogical, wrong subject here. Also, we would like to thank the Living History Committee, Millie Broca. I saw you come in. There you are. Keith and Wendy Guyon, over here under the tent. Dick Martin, where did you end up sitting? There you are. Holly Kirkendale and Marissa Muniz-Kolhoff. She's over under the tent over there. We would also like to thank this year's presenters, Tom Edge, Agatha Hickerson, Wendy Guyon, Judy Guyon Utzler, Judy Guyon Utzler, Paul Herringshaw, Anderson Lee, Ashley Meringue, and Reverend Jeff Schooley. Just some quick background about this event. The first Living History Day was held August 29th of 2004 in the atrium of the Wood County Library. Every year after that, it was in Oak Grove Cemetery until 2019, when it was moved here to the grounds of the Wood County Museum in order to celebrate the inhabitants of our pauper cemetery in conjunction with our award-winning exhibit for comfort and convenience. The idea of memorializing former citizens of Wood County in the form of first-person storytelling is credited with Lolita Guthrie, a former member of the Wood County Genealogical Society and a member of the Bowling Green Sesquicentennial Committee. With that, Keith will come up and announce our presenters.
welcome. Thank you all for coming this afternoon. We have a good program for you. The theme for our program is educators. And we've got teachers in the classroom, we've got teachers in other places. We're running the gamut for that. Do you guys have posters or programs that tell you who we're honoring today, or should I mention those names? You've already got that? Okay. I'm going to ask that if there's anybody who is related to one of our honorees, could you please stand up? Anybody? Anybody? Or if you don't want to stand up, wave your hand. Okay, excellent. We will begin the program tonight with Myrtle Bechtel. She was born on October 1st, 1893, and she died on June 11th, 1983, and she was a teacher in North Baltimore for many years. So please welcome Myrtle Bechtel.
It is certainly nice to be on summer vacation. I have taught school for over 50 years, and at this point in my life, I'm just ready to slow down a little bit. I started teaching at Tontagani Rural School and also taught at Hammondsburg before becoming a fixture at North Baltimore schools. Teaching school for that many years meant I had to keep up with my own education, so I attended classes at Worcester College, Miami University, Ohio University, and, of course, Bowling Green State University. In 1917, after taking an examination for the teacher certification, I was informed that I had received very good grades. The law provided that an average of 85 must be made, with no grade below a 75. Either luck was with me or studying helped, but in 2 or 3 instances of my final exam, I reached grades as high as 95. As you might already know, if you have children or grandchildren, that over the years, methods of teaching have changed. Some for the good and some maybe not so good. While I have no favorite, I have found that by combining all ways that were effective in the past works for me. Some students respond more quickly to the old methods, while others respond to the newer ones. My advice to new teachers: patience and perseverance. You will be discouraged, but when you realize that one of your students is responding, that is ample reward. After all, each student has an individual personality and needs and responds differently. All right, that's my lecture for today. I did have a life outside of teaching. There is collecting antiques, especially pictures, growing flowers, and music. Plus, what is life without a few organizations to keep you busy, like Eastern Stars, American Legion Auxiliary, Delta Kappa Gamma sorority, Bridge Club, Senior Literary Circle, First Methodist Church, and of course, teacher-affiliated organizations. Music was something I really enjoyed. During the summer, I gave piano lessons. One of my most memorable moments as a teacher was my birthday in April 1946. Would you believe my students and their mothers got together to celebrate my birthday? The children wore Easter bonnets made of paper made by their mothers, and I was crowned queen by the pupils and presented with gifts chosen to show their esteem for me, and so many cards of deep appreciation from parents of pupils I am now teaching, as well as former students. The party was completed with a lighted birthday cake. Now, that is a birthday I will remember for years to come. In 1960, along with the 5th grade teacher, I took my 4th grade class and we went to the Ohio Caverns by bus. That was 55 kids. A big headache, but oh, we had so much fun, and the children got a wonderful and interesting experience. The Ohio Caverns really are where nature carved a fairyland. We even took the classes to see Ohio's outstanding historical homes: the Piat-Mackachee Castle, built in 1864, and the Piat-Mackachee Castle, built in 1879. To finish off the trip, the bus driver, Mr. Dilbone, took us to the highest point in Ohio, Camel's Hill. It goes without saying that my students had to write a story about their experience when they got back. One of my most rewarding accomplishments was the establishment of the toy band. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? Well, maybe I was, but oh, what fun we had with that band. In 1927, I got the idea of the toy band. That was the first year that the schools were in a new building. There was no money really available to purchase equipment, so we started with tambourines and oatmeal boxes. And of course, by 1935, we have tambourines, triangles, cymbals, bells, clocks, sticks, xylophones, and drums. After our first year, with the help of the mothers, we also now have capes for each student. Everyone in the band, with the exception of the drummer, all members were first and second graders. And believe me, they had no sense of rhythm whatsoever when we first started. We tried both the Victrola and the piano as the accompaniment, but the piano found to be less difficult for the children to follow. Our band has performed for different organizations such as the Farmers Institute and many more. Most of the time, the band consisted of 65 kiddies, although I would like to one day have 100 students in the band. It's just as easy to teach 100 as 65. One of our special numbers was the Parade of Wooden Soldiers. Fitting, don't you think? My brother Harold was also a teacher, having taught industrial arts in the North Baltimore area for 47 years. While neither Harold or I married, we spent our adult life teaching the children of others and both had an enjoyable and fulfilling life. All right, it's time for me to move on and allow someone else to discuss life's highs and lows. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Myrtle. Our next honoree is Ethel Keep Berlin. She was born on June 28th, 1910, and she died on January 27th, 1997. Ethel was in the program last year, but she got sick and wasn't able to be part of the program, so we put her in this year because she was one of the major teachers in the area. So let us welcome Ethel.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank you all for coming and allowing me to tell you my story. I'm Ethel Keep. Well, later Ethel Berlin. Although I spent a lot of years away from here, I did grow up in Bowling Green helping out with the family dairy. Believe it or not, I've never been comfortable doing these kind of things. In high school, I was petrified to stand up in front of any class and give a report. Maybe that is why I took to writing down my stories. I had a storytelling father who greatly influenced me on the importance of telling stories. At night, we would play games and he would read us stories, sometimes from a book and sometimes from the Bible. Sometimes he would tell us his own memories. Learning comes in so many ways, doesn't it? And even though I'm nervous, I want you to hear a piece of my story. I don't have time to tell it all to you. But I did write a book. The book I wrote is called My Life in the 20th Century. And if you want to read more, it's actually in the Wood County Library if you'd like to read it. From what I've been told, I was a very difficult child. My mother would take to tying me to the clothesline to keep me safe in the yard where she could see me because I liked to run away. When I was 4, there was a knock at the front door. I ran to answer it, and without caution, I invited an unknown man into our home. Not something you did in those days, but anyway, I didn't see a problem with it. There he stood, bag over his shoulder, and I thought he looked like Santa Claus and had a sack of toys. So of course I let him in. And just so you know, nothing bad ever happened. My mother could be a bit overprotective. I had one sister, Kate, who was my best friend. And I had another sister, but she had died at 1, just a little bit before I was born. I'm sure that affected my mother deeply, and I think that's why she worried so much. Kate and I were never allowed to do anything risky, like ride a bike or go roller skating, but I made up for that later. What she wanted and needed us to do was help with the farm. We were poor, and there was a lot of work to do. She also thought it was a good thing for me to learn how to sew. She even gave me a pincushion one year for Christmas. That didn't help. I never took to sewing, probably because I knew my mother would make me take out all the bad stitches and do them again. I never felt I could live up to her standards. But in spite of that, I never felt like I wasn't loved. Later in life, after I married Carl, he said that I had the huggiest and kissiest relatives he had ever seen. I think one of the best things that ever happened to me was when a new art teacher came to the Bowling Green High School. I began to take art lessons, and she helped me find my passion, art. With her help, I talked my parents into letting me go to summer school at Ohio University to study art. Although I enjoyed my time there and went on for more schooling, I was disappointed with the classes. I wanted to be taught art skills. Instead, I was taught to teach. Not that teaching isn't important. I didn't think that's really where my skills were. I guess it's a good thing they taught me how to teach, because I certainly wound up doing a lot of it. After I came home from my studies at Ohio University, I was hired to teach art at the Toledo School. However, the Depression came and the art program went by the wayside. It's sad, isn't it? When some teaching has to go, it's always the arts. While it's important to learn, read, write, and do figures, it's also important to learn to tap into your creative side. Your creative mind is like a sponge, always ready to absorb a new idea. Isn't that what learning is about? In spite of the bumps and curves in my pursuit of art, it was the best thing I could have ever done. I eventually entered the Kieran School of Commercial Art in Toledo, and that is where I met Carl Berlin. One kiss and I was lost. We married and raised a family. We dreamed of going to New York City as artists. While that never happened, we spent our lives pursuing our love of art and bringing others along on the journey. What we did involved creating art, but also teaching others so they could become artists and art teachers. For 10 years, Carl and I taught at our school, the Berlin Art Center here in Bowling Green on Main Street. Our school was very successful. Carl taught the adults and I taught the children. I guess my summer at Ohio University taught me some things because many of our students went on to become accomplished artists, and art instructors. The Art Center was something we always wanted to do, and we did it. We never got to New York City, but we made a successful life here in Bowling Green. We accomplished a more important goal, and that was bringing the pleasure to others through the arts. We even had a role in starting the Black Swamp Players, a theater group which continues to bring pleasure to others through another avenue of art, storytelling. Even though my life did not play out the way that I imagined as a young woman, it played out ways that I could never have imagined. I like to think that my parents would be proud of the woman I have become and the family I have raised, carrying on the legacy of contributing to the community of Bowling Green. As I grew older, I recognized that the great influence my college professors had on me, not because they were necessarily artists, but because their mature personalities and their dedication to teach. I came to realize that meant more to me than all the book knowledge I could have ever obtained. I was proud to pursue my love of art, but also have a great deal of pride in the reality that all 4 of my children graduated college. I like to think that my whole life was about learning, teaching, and creating. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ethel. Next, we will hear from Arch Conklin. He was born May 14th, 1889, and he died on May 28th, 1970. He was the Dean of Students at BGSU. So, let's hear his story.
Hello, and thank you for being here. You may recognize my name, Conklin, because there is a dormitory on the BGSU campus called Conklin Hall. Maybe you lived there. Maybe your would-be Falcon Flame lived there. At any rate, it is named after me, and I was flattered to be honored in this way. But if that is the sum total of my contribution to Wood County, well, this story will be very short. No, my story is a long one, not because I am super important, but because my story extends through the hundreds and hundreds of students that I worked with as an educator for over 50 years. And that's what I would like to celebrate with you today. I don't know when I decided to be an educator. My father wanted me to join his insurance business, and I did for a few years. But teaching was probably always my destiny. As a youth, I liked to go to school, and I liked learning what my teachers at Weston taught me. Well, at least most of the time. I got my first teaching opportunity right after I graduated high school. I was given the chance to teach at one of the small rural schools near Weston, and that's when I started really learning, meaning I learned how much I did not know about teaching. But that was my start towards a lifelong career in education. My name is Arch Conklin, and I was born on May 14th, 1889. My parents were James and Ella Conklin, and I grew up in Weston. In 1916, I married Helen K. Saxby, who also grew up in Weston. We were married on May 14th, my birthday, and that was one way that she could always remember when my birthday was. Though I think she would tell you that was my way of remembering when our anniversary was. Either way, we were married, and she has been by my side ever since. We didn't have any children of our own, but we enjoyed inviting neighborhood kids to the house. Helen always had cookies and sweets and activities for the kids, which is a pretty good recipe to make sure they kept coming back. There were 2 boys, Steve and Bill Rothy, who are related to us. Their grandmother is Helen's mother's sister. Bill even stayed with us one summer after the family had moved to California, and we were glad to have him. My formal education began when I enrolled at the very fine Presbyterian University Worcester College, where I received a bachelor's degree in education in 1917. I from there was hired to be superintendent at the Waterville schools, and I worked there for a couple of years before taking a job as superintendent of Granville. I worked for 13 years with Bowling Green schools, first as a high school principal and then as the superintendent. But all of this time just served the purpose of preparing me to become the dean of students at Bowling Green State University. I was originally hired to the university as the dean of men, but after about a year, they named me dean of students. And my job was to look after the kids and do what I could to help them through their years as students. I participated in a lot of programs designed to fill a variety of needs and to make the lives easier for these students. I met a lot of great kids during my 20 years at BGSU, and of course, I dealt with the problems that some students faced and did what I could to help them out. I made contact with many students over the years, and at one time I remember a colleague of mine asked me if there was a student who was particularly memorable. So I told him, I remember this one time that some students had gone to a drinking party at one of the bars in town, just one of the many times that students went to the bars, but this time things evidently did not go so well, and I was asked to visit one of the boys at the police station. I knew this boy. His father was a superintendent at one of the nearby schools, and his mother was, of all things, the director of the Women's Christian Temperance Union. I walked into that boy's cell, and he was lying face down by the drainage gutter, looking not too dissimilar from that drainage gutter. After a few teaspoons of baking soda mixed with warm water, I left him to sleep and to sleep it off. The next morning, he was in my office as he had been instructed, and there were tears streaming down his face. He begged me for leniency. He was near panic. And it was then that I remembered what a former administrator had told me long ago. He said, if they need knocking down, knock them down. And if they need helping up, help them up. With that in mind, I looked at that boy and I said, go to class, son. Then he really started crying, but now they were tears of joy. And imagine this, I never had a bit of trouble out of him the rest of his time. When I began at BGSU, I noticed that there were only 3 local fraternity houses on campus. And I knew that fraternities were places where students could make connections and friends that would help them with their careers after they graduated. And some of those friendships would last a lifetime even. Now, there were a lot of fraternities across the nation, and I was determined to bring some of those to Bowling Green. It was a lot of work over several years, but by the time I retired, BGSU had 12 national and 2 local chapters. And by then, Greek Week had become an annual event on campus. One year, when my retirement was approaching, Greek Week was dedicated in my honor, and it was an honor. I appreciated that they cared enough to make a fuss over me. And when I thanked them, I said, my deepest gratification has been my association with the men who have been products of our fraternity system, and watching these men go out into the world and into life and apply what they have learned here most beneficially. That is more rewarding to me than any personal recognition that I might receive. In 1959, I retired from BGSU. By now, I was being referred to as an elder statesman, though I felt like folks really emphasized the elder more in that phrase. Near my retirement, a friend asked me to share what the most difficult moment had been while at BGSU, and I told him that moment has not yet come. That moment, that most difficult moment, I said, will happen when I have to say goodbye for the last time to this life that I have lived here. And that proved to be true. 2 years after my retirement, the university built Conklin Hall, and I was invited to the ceremony when the building was completed. I wasn't convinced that I deserved such an honor, but I was very pleased that Conklin Hall was located right next to the frat houses. That seemed fitting to me. I've had a good life. Of course, there have been some setbacks and problems along the way. And when something like that happens, I've been known to say, Delphi bloats! Delphi was one of the cows I looked after when I was a kid, and as for the bloats, well, Delphi had some serious gas issues. It's a nice euphemism to say when things go wrong. Indeed, you may get a chance to say Delphi bloats as you try to leave the museum parking lot and make your way onto 6. But I have accomplished a lot of the things I set out to do, and Helen has been there right by my side the entire time. I will finish with this, with something I said some years ago. I'd been around long enough that a lot of my former students were living and working in town, and I said, you know, I can get my teeth pulled, my eyes fitted, my hair cut, I can get legislated upon, I can get preached to, and I can pay taxes voted through by the kids I helped raise and discipline and educate. This town is lousy with my kids, and the most rewarding thing is that I'm always welcome in their company. I couldn't ask for a better tribute than that. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, if you have any connection with Wood County Genealogy Association, everybody's having trouble with that word, or the Historical Society, you probably know the name Lolita Guthrie. It was mentioned earlier this afternoon. She was born on September 14th, 1925, and she died November 16th in 2015. So let's hear what she has to say.
What a gorgeous day for my living history program. I mean that. My living history program. Maybe I should explain that. 20 years ago, a friend told me about a cemetery tour that included stops at the stones of some of the residents, and a portrayer would give the audience a short talk about that person. It was wonderful. And it sounded like something that Wood County Genealogical Society should get involved in. I convinced the ad hoc committee, the one that had worked on the Bowling Green Sesquicentennial book, to take on the project at Oak Grove Cemetery. They had the event for 2 years, and then they decided it was a little bit more than they can handle. At that time, the Wood County Historical Society was approached about taking over the project. The society agreed, with just one stipulation. It had to include anyone buried in Wood County, not just in Oak Grove Cemetery. Over the years, it has been adapted to include anyone who had a profound influence on Wood County, whether they ended up being buried in the county or not. While the project is sponsored by the Historical Society, the the Genealogical Society has continued to work with them. So yes, I take some credit for this program. I'm so glad that it continues to this day. I was born in Hancock County, Indiana, where my father had a poultry farm. Some really interesting stories about that life. But sorry, I don't have much time today to tell you about it. Maybe some other time. I did collect some of those stories for a Christmas project in 1983 by writing about my father and that poultry farm so that I could give copies to the grandchildren. There were so many stories that I had to keep writing through the years. While attending Ball State University, I met Merle, where he was in Army training before seeing active duty in Europe. After World War II, Merle returned and we married in 1946 and completed our college degrees at Ball State University. I taught elementary school in Muncie, Indiana, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and Cincinnati, Ohio, and then it was time to be a stay-at-home mom. In 1954, Merle accepted a position at Bowling Green State University, and I became a volunteer. It's hard to remember what it was exactly that I started doing when I was a volunteer first, but one interest that Merle and I had together was bluebirds. We remember seeing the bluebirds in the country roads through Indiana and Kansas. So we got a supply of bluebird boxes, and then we had to look for a place to put them. We turned to rural cemeteries. I just love cemeteries. The stories and the history they hold, so fascinating. Most of those little cemeteries were owned by township trustees, and they heartily approved of the bluebird boxes. My interest in cemetery preservation melded into a local program for the local Genealogical Society, where we showed a video from the Bluebird Society. And from that meeting, Adopt a Cemetery project was born. Members of the group agreed to place bluebird boxes facing into the cemetery and monitoring them. It was wonderful. My interest in cemeteries continued, and in 1990 I started going to Mansfield with a friend of mine who was on the board at the Ohio Genealogical Society, the OGS. While that friend attended board meetings, I would do research. And before the end of the year, I had accepted the position as OGS Cemetery Committee Chair. I was the cemetery lady. It took 13 years, but in 2003, we published Ohio Cemeteries, 1803 to 2003, and it had information about more than 14,000 burial sites and cemeteries in Ohio. It was so fascinating. In 1993, I was elected to the Board of Trustees, and I continued to serve that until I decided it was time to retire in 2005. I volunteered for my church in various capacities, my children's elementary school, the hospital guild, but I think I was most passionate about the Wood County Genealogical Society and my work there. Until the county commissioners were talked into giving us a regular home, we would hold our board meetings and newsletter assembly in the old cistern in my home. We'd make a day of it. Eventually, we moved into the old jail, and we would assemble the newsletter around a picnic table in the holding area of the jail. Of course, this provided a wonderful way for us to make money. We would provide the striped prison outfit, and people would come in and have their pictures taken in one of the cells. It was such a hoot. Bless the commissioners when they decided to make that old jail into a record center and law library, and they provided us with 2 rooms in the courthouse annex. What a great place this has become. Although I served in various offices for the society, I guess my best title was Project Manager. I really liked that title, and I did my best to make sure that there were plenty of projects for our members to work on and to look forward to. Some people said that they didn't think my mind slept while my body rested because I always had some project or another on the back burner. I'm proud that I was somewhat instrumental, with help from the Genealogical Society volunteers, in transcribing and publishing books about Wood County probate records, county cemeteries, Wood County's role in the Civil War, and the list goes on and on. It was so fascinating. Thank you, society members, for volunteering. Volunteering and giving back to our community does have its rewards. I've been pleasantly surprised and honored to receive a volunteerism reward from the National Federation of Genealogical Societies, and in 1988 was named Bowling Green Outstanding Citizen. And in 1996, I received the Wood County Good Citizenship Award. What a nice honor. Looking back, I have had a very rewarding and fulfilling life. 66 wonderful years of marriage to Myrtle, 2 great children, Scott and Carla, a wonderful granddaughter, Julie, and 2 twin great-granddaughters. I am so fortunate. And I am so glad that you all came out on this gorgeous day for my Living History program. Thank you.
Thank you, Lolita. Bernard Haas is next. He was born September 13th, 1922, and he died September 6th, 2016. He grew up near Custer, and he taught in Napoleon and Sandusky and other places. So here is Bernard Haas.
"21 days from now would make me 122 years old were I still around, and although I didn't quite make it that long, I was blessed with 94 years on this wonderful earth. And what an interesting life it was. For me, life started in a house at the corner of Roundhead and Maplewood Roads near Custer. That's where my mother was at the time. My dad farmed 160 acres, and although he bought a McCormick Deering tractor in 1927, my 2 brothers and I were still using a team of 3 horses to do the lighter farm work while I was in high school. I attended Milton Township School. Dad drove what they called the kid wagon, which was a sort of horse-drawn school bus, but me, I never rode it. I had the pleasure of riding in a Rio Speedwagon school bus. Now, let me tell you about this bus. It had seats on either side and a long, narrow bench going down the center. It could hold around 30 to 35 kids. Now, in the winter, for the heat, they would divert the exhaust up through a thick pipe that ran the whole length of the bus. The exhaust came up through the floorboards in the front, and then it ran beneath the bench and back down through the floorboards and outside of the rear of the bus. It didn't exactly keep the bus warm, and I can't imagine anyone approving a system like that today. Now, let's see. After graduating high school, I started working for Isley's store in Bowling Green. I got paid $10 for an entire week's worth of work, and that wasn't just a 40-hour week, you understand. I usually worked more than 40, but I still only got paid $10, and I had to buy my own lunch. I rented a room in Bowling Green for $3.50 a week, and that meant I didn't have much of that $10 left. Well, after 4 months of that, I quit, and I went to work at Morris's 5 and dime store. Now, there I was really just a stock boy, but they called me assistant manager, and the reason they did that was because that way they could work me as many hours as they wanted to in a week. There I made $15 a week, and I managed to save up enough to buy a 1934 Oldsmobile for $100. After working for Morris for 5 months, they transferred me to Alpena, Michigan, and I got a $1 an hour raise. Later, I was transferred again to St. Mary's, this time with no raise. In 1942, I was transferred yet again to Napoleon. There I made $17 a week. Now, due to a misunderstanding with the manager, I got let go, and so I went to Cargill's in Maumee to work on construction for what turned out to be a 2-week job. It was then that I got my notice to report to Erie Proving Grounds. There I got my physical. I rented a room, and I got a civil service job that paid $1,260 a year. Oh, well, here I've been rattling about my life, and I just realized I haven't introduced myself. My name is Bernard Haas. They call me Bernie. My parents were Elmer and Ethel. My brothers were John and Robert. Anyway, I got inducted into the Army on December 15th of 1942. Reported to Camp Perry on the 22nd, where I did KP until I was shipped out to Camp Hood, Texas on the 27th. I had requested an assignment with Air Force and Ordnance. When I arrived at Camp Hood, I saw trucks waiting there that were from the 608th Tank Destroyer Battalion. No Air Force, no Ordnance. After completing basic training and field maneuvers, my unit was moved to Camp Atterbury, where we were told we were going overseas. But as usual with the Army, things changed, and the 608th was deactivated. I got reassigned to the 643rd Tank Destroyer Battalion. On September 4th, we finally shipped out for Cherbourg, France, and then on September 13th, I spent my 22nd birthday off the coast of England. Oh, I could spend hours telling you stories of my experiences in World War II, but that'll have to wait for another time. But let me just say that while I was in the area of months, a German jet came flying overhead, and there were the four of us that moved into the alley between two buildings. Now, our anti-aircraft guns threw up what looked like a solid wall of anti-aircraft guns and flake. Tut, 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 tut. But the gunners just couldn't find the proper lead to catch up with that jet. It was moving too fast. Oh, there were spent anti-aircraft slugs and shrapnel pieces just raining down all around us. It was awful. Well, I decided that would be a good time to go inside, write a letter to my girl back home. Her name was Janice Lair. We met the very night I was inducted into the Army, and as a matter of fact, we'd been writing each other ever since. Well, anyway, I only made it a few steps when, wham, I was down. Now, there was no pain, but I felt numb from the waist down. I couldn't move my leg. Well, the fellas got me inside and called the medic. It turned out I'd been hit by a .50 caliber anti-aircraft gun, one of our own. Now, when the commanding officer saw the wound that I'd received from that, he said to me, "Haas, that's quite a wound. I'd give you $1 million for a wound like that." And I remember saying, "No, sir, I'm keeping this one. You have to get your own." Well, that bullet had enough momentum to go right through my leg, but not enough to tear through the other side of my pants. And you want to know something? I still have that bullet. I was discharged on November 17th, 1945, and then I went back to go work at Erie Ordnance. I had been promised when I left that I would get any raises I was due while I was gone, but when I got my first paycheck since returning, it showed I was still only being paid $5.52 a day. So I quit and I got a job at Libby Owens. Janice and I got married in June of 1947, and we have 2 children, a son Gary and a daughter Linda. Well, I decided to use my GI Bill funds and attend the Bowling Green State University. I had received an extra 12 months because I had been wounded. I started in a pre-dental program, but then I found out the GI Bill wouldn't pay for dental school, so I switched to chemistry and physics since I'd already taken the science courses, and I ended up becoming a teacher. Now, I did eventually finish the pre-dental program, but I was happy with teaching high school, and I never explored the possibility of going on to dental school. I graduated in 1952 and started teaching at Morenci High School, where I stayed until 1954, when I moved to Napoleon and taught through to the 1968 school year. In 1963, I was awarded a National Science Foundation grant in mathematics, and was able to further my study of math and physics at Washington State University. Then we moved to Fremont, where I supervised curriculum development in the Sandusky County school system for 16 years until I retired in 1983. I really liked my years of teaching, but I don't know if I could have adapted to the breakdown in school discipline that occurred in the 1960s. Back when I first started teaching, I decided I'd quit the profession immediately if there ever came a time when I couldn't maintain control of my classrooms. If I'd been still teaching in the 1970s, let me tell you, I'm afraid the fur would have flown now and then. Well, I feel I've bent your ears long enough, so I just want to say thank you for hearing my story.
Thank you, Bernie. It's Esther Hayhurst's turn. She was born in August 31st, 1908, and she died May 23rd, 1996. She taught at Bowling Green High School. So, let's welcome Miss Hayhurst.
I was destined to become a teacher. It was in the family. My mother was a teacher. When she married my father, she was called one of Ritchie County's best teachers. Ritchie County is in West Virginia, where they lived at the time. My father was a graduate of Fairmont Teachers College in West Virginia and was superintendent of Ritchie County schools for 14 years. They lived in the town of Pullman in Ritchie County. I was born there, August 31st, 1908. In 1922, we moved to Greenwich, Ohio, and settled there. My older sister, Ruth, was also a teacher. She graduated from BGSU in 1929 and taught science, English, and home ec. She taught in Greenwich, Lorraine, New London, Nova, and Norwalk. I graduated from BGSU also in 1930 with a degree in education and was immediately hired by Defiance High School, where I taught history and social studies. My first year as a teacher was not a good year. Nothing seemed right. I didn't know how to manage the students, and the whole year seemed one problem after another. So I decided to quit teaching and do something else. When I told my father, he sat me down, as fathers are wont to do, and reminded me that teaching was in my blood. He also told me that teachers always have bad years now and again, difficult years, especially when they're getting started. So he convinced me to keep at it for a while. So I went back to Defiance for a second year, and I am so glad that I did. I had to admit later that Dad was right. As time went by, I started to learn what worked in the classroom, and I came to love teaching history to teenagers. It was fun, and I came to enjoy the time I spent with my students. I cannot think of anything I would have rather done. For a while, I also taught part-time at BGSU, teaching education majors. One of my students, Dr. James Shokier, became the principal of Bowling Green High School, so we were colleagues for a while. While I was teaching, I continued my studies. There is always one more thing to learn. I went to Case Western Reserve. I went to the University of Wisconsin, the University of Maine, DePauw University, and Duke. And I took everything I learned back to my classroom so I could share it with my students. During my years as a teacher, I had a lot of student teachers. They didn't need to learn the curriculum, but I could guide them on how to be more effective teachers. Many of my student teachers went on to become history teachers themselves, but not all of them. There's one student teacher that I remember for something different. His name was David Wattle. Perhaps you've heard of him. He earned a gold medal in the 1972 Summer Olympics for the 800-meter run, and I believe he broke the world record in that run. As a student teacher, he couldn't wear his usual cap and jersey. He had to be more dressed up. So he bought suits and ties and sports coats. One day when I put him in charge of the class, he started writing things on the blackboard, and I noticed that there was a price tag still attached to his jacket. You know, the students noticed also. So to avoid any embarrassment, I quietly picked up some scissors and tiptoed up behind him and snipped off the label without him ever knowing, as he went on with the lesson. There were a number of organizations who saw fit to give me an award of some kind, including a Fulbright Fellowship when I was studying at Sophia University in Tokyo, and a Service Above Self award from the Rotary Club. I was even named the Ohio Teacher of the Year in 1966. I was honored by this attention, but of course that isn't why I chose to become a teacher. My biggest rewards came from students who were struggling in the classroom, and I was able to help them understand the material and increase their grade. Students who were so smart and quick, they ended up teaching me something. Students who told me years later how much they enjoyed my class. Students who decided to become history teachers. Students who remember certain days when they thought back to their time in the classroom and they shared their stories. One high school student remembered an unusual test I gave to the class. Instead of having them answer a lot of questions, I gave them several pages of political cartoons and told them to choose one and explain it. I did this from time to time, but this student loved the challenge. One of my university students remembered the class being invited to my house during Christmas break for cookies and tea, and I would ask them about their first quarter at class. They are the rewards that I cherish. I did other things with my life in addition to teaching. I was a trustee of the Wood County District Public Library. I was a committee member of admissions of the School of Applied Health and Physical Therapy program at Medical College of Toledo. And I was an active member of the Wheeled Meals program in Bowling Green, serving as an officer and even the director, in addition to taking meals to people who needed them and visiting with them. I also belonged to Kappa Delta Pi, the American Association of University Women, the National Council of Social Studies, and the Shakespeare Roundtable. I retired from teaching in 1974 after 36 years at Bowling Green High School. I kept busy with other things, committees and volunteering and visiting with friends. There are a couple things I would like to share that you may not know about me. I enjoyed making little wedding bonnets that I would give to former students and friends who were getting married. And I found a couple of very good friends, Katie Kreider and Emily Guyan, who enjoyed making peanut brittle as much as I did. The three of us would get together once a year in Emily's basement and make batch after batch of peanut brittle. In fact, I remember one year when her son Keith and his wife Wendy joined us in making peanut brittle. So much fun was had by all, and the peanut brittle was wonderful. So I've had a good life. I met and worked with hundreds of high school students and college students. I made good friends everywhere I went, and I kept learning new things. And I did my best to see that my students had a good experience in my classroom, that they finished with an appreciation of history, and then they went out into the world better equipped to succeed. Perhaps some of you out there were students in my classroom at some time. If so, welcome. It's good to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hayhurst. How many of you were students of Ms. Hayhurst? Oh, a lot of you. So, we move on now. Now we are going to hear from Dr. Clayton Cole. He was born in June 15th, 1975. That's not right. 1875. I'm going to fire my typist. And he died November 10th, 1938. He was a professor at Bowling Green State University, and there is a dormitory on campus that bears his name. So, let us welcome Dr. Cole.
I came from a family of farmers. My grandfather emigrated from Germany in 1852 when my father was just 4 years old. They settled in Berea and then moved to a small farm near Perrysburg in 1864. My father married my mother in 1872, and a few years later, he bought the farm, the Davenport farm, and worked there for the rest of his life. That's where I was born on June 15th, 1875. I was one of 4 children, but both of my brothers, Edward and Earl, died when they were very young. My sister Meltha and I helped with the chores as we grew up. I enjoyed working on the farm, and I liked working with my family. Farming was the family business, and I might have chosen to follow my father and grandfather and become a farmer myself. Except that I discovered that I loved learning. I did well in school. I was curious about a lot of things. I would learn about something and want to know more. I enjoyed finding new things to learn about, famous people, important moments in history, how things worked. And although I supported the farm and my family, my career took a different turn. I became a teacher. I got my first teaching job when I was just 17 years old. I taught at a small rural school and another small school in Dowling. I enjoyed teaching so much that I wanted to know more about it. I wanted to be a good teacher. And so, in 1896, I enrolled in the State University of Columbus, where I got my Bachelor's of Education degree in 1901. That school is now known as the Ohio State University. After I graduated, I was hired to be the principal of the high school in Mechanicsburg, Ohio, which is down in Champaign County. A few years later, they made me superintendent. While I was in Mechanicsburg, I met my wife, Margaret Williams. She was a teacher at Mechanicsburg, and her home was in Jeffersonville, and that's where we got married on August 2nd, 1905. We've been married for more than 30 years, and we have 2 sons, John and Fred. Over the next 15 years, I worked at several schools. Mount Holyoke in South Hadley, Massachusetts, the College of the City of New York, Scott High School in Toledo. And I went to graduate school at New York University, where I earned my master's degree and my PhD. I enjoyed the process of getting a college education up through graduate school, and I learned a great deal along the way. But I also had a lot of varied interests. My curiosity was as strong as ever, and I wanted to investigate many areas of study. I would start with a question. How does this work? Why did this happen? I would research and gather data until I had a clear idea of the answer, and then I would write up my conclusion and publish it. In 1900, while I was still working on my bachelor's degree in Columbus, I became interested in the work of Congress and some of the bills they debated. I wrote the congressional story of the Kansas-Nebraska Act that year. I was interested in Otto von Bismarck and his work toward the unification of Germany. That may be because my ancestors were from there, but I like to think I would have been interested in it anyway. Well, in 1903, I wrote Bismarck's work for Germany from 1862 to 1866. My dissertation for my PhD in 1914 was Claims as a Cause of the Mexican War. I wrote about a lot of things over the years and kept them in boxes which are still stored in my house today. All of this prepared me for my career at Bowling Green State University. In 1920, I joined the faculty of the college as a sociology teacher. I was the first instructor on campus with a completed PhD. At the time, the school was called the Bowling Green Normal College. It was a school to certify students who planned to become teachers, but they chose college instead of school because they never intended for it to just be a 2-year teacher's program. That's where things were when I joined the faculty. As the first faculty member to have a PhD, it made sense that I should be involved in growing the school. I was very much in favor of the plan, so I got right to work. The process, as with everything in higher education, was long. It wasn't until 1929 that the Education Department and the Liberal Arts Department began 4-year programs that would result in a diploma and not just a certificate of teaching. The graduate program was in place by 1935, the year that Bowling Green Normal College officially became Bowling Green State University. There's still work to do, but I predict that time will come when BGSU takes its place as one of the major universities in this country. Not bad for a child who grew up doing chores on the farm. I enjoyed the process of putting all this together in the same way I enjoyed the process of everything I've researched throughout my life. There is, of course, much more I can learn, and I will keep investigating things that are interesting to me. I'm determined to see that BGSU has a great graduate school with a large variety of areas to study. Thank you for listening to my story.
Thank you, Dr. Cole. A note, after Dr. Cole died, his wife took all of his boxes of things that he had written and donated them to the library on campus. And they are part of the archives, and you can go up there and look at them anytime you want to. Our program concludes with C.B. Stewart. He was born June 30th, 1899, and he died August 26th, 1967. He was a farmer, and he taught at Ohio University, sharing the farming technologies to other farmers. So here is C.B. Stewart.
Good afternoon. I am Cyrus B. Stewart, but most folks simply know me as C.B. Stewart, the Wood County Agricultural Agent. I served in that capacity for 27 years, from 1934 to 1961, which I believe makes me the longest tenured county agricultural agent in Wood County, or to serve Wood County. I probably should start by telling you a little bit about myself. I'm not a Wood County native, but I definitely called Wood County home. I'm actually a native of Illinois, born in 1899 in the small town of Biggsville, located near the Mississippi River, not far from the Iowa border. Good farmland, much like we have right here in Wood County. My interest in agriculture took me to the College of Agriculture at the University of Illinois. And then my first job brought me to Northwest Ohio, where I was hired as the vocational agricultural teacher at nearby Liberty Center High School. And after several years of working with rambunctious farm boys, I was ready for a change. So in 1934, when Lloyd Kurtz, the previous county agent, took a job with the Farm Credit Agency, I was excited to become the county agricultural agent for Wood County. I joined Grace Wagner, home demonstration agent, and we worked together with Wood County farm families to improve their lives in the midst of the Great Depression. I probably should have thought twice before I took this job. Times were tough, and for Wood County farm families, things were even tougher. Even though historians point to the stock market crash of 1929 as the beginning of the Great Depression, farmers were having a rough go of it many years prior. In fact, the depressed farm economy was one of the reasons the Wood County Fair ended in 1927. And just before I started as the county agent, Wood County was in the national news when a local bank foreclosed on a Wood County farmer. When the bank forced an auction of the farmer's livestock and equipment to pay the mortgage, neighboring farmers banded together and only bid pennies on each item. The auction, known as a penny auction, could have turned violent. A rope with a noose on it hung from the haymow, and buckets of tar and feathers were nearby. Fortunately, Wood County Sheriff Bruce Pratt and County Prosecuting Attorney Ray Ladd were able to keep things calm, and the auction went on without an incident. But the neighboring farmers did make their point, because the auction only netted $14.31, and all of the livestock and farm equipment were then returned to the farmer. As a county agent, I was on the faculty of the Ag College at Ohio State University, our state's land-grant college. I was a professor for Ohio State University. My job was to disseminate research-based information to local farmers and farm families to help them learn how new and more efficient ways of farming. But that wasn't always easy. Farmers were resistant to change. The way Dad or Grandpa farmed was good enough for me. And I also had to overcome this "I'm from the government and I'm here to help you" image. Building trust with the farmers and their families was the most important thing that I did. Because once trust and respect was established, then the farmers became more receptive to new ideas. And we did this by working with the entire family. Our home demonstration agent, Grace Wagner, worked with the farm wives to introduce new and improved ways of managing a home. In addition, Grace and I both worked with 4-H. And we found that 4-H members were often the best way to introduce new ideas to their parents. Although we probably didn't realize it at the time, 1934 to 1961 was an exciting time for the growth of innovation in agriculture. In the 27 years I was Wood County agent, we went from farming with horses to having tractors and mechanization on every farm. We increased our yields through the use of hybrid seeds. We started being better stewards of the land through the use of the soil and water conservation programs. And we became more efficient in livestock production and management through improved livestock breeding and nutrition. Farm organizations became better established, and that way farmers and their families had a voice in government affairs. One of the methods that we used to show new farming and homemaking ideas was through Farmers Institutes. These programs were held nearly in every small town in the county. But these institutes weren't just boring talks. Interspersed with talks by university extension specialists, there was an opportunity for farmers to see some of the latest farm equipment, and for the ladies to see some of the latest labor-saving ideas for the kitchen. FFA and FHA students showed their projects, and songs were sung, and 3-act plays were presented by community members at the conclusion of the Institute. These Farmers Institutes were an excellent way to show new ideas and provide a time for farm families to socialize during the long, cold winter months. It may surprise some of you to learn that in 1940, Wood County was one of the largest beef feeding counties in the east of the Mississippi. And these weren't the large farms that are in the news today. These were hundreds of small farms around the county, each feeding 20 to 200 beef cattle. And we had a very active organization called the Wood County Cattle Feeders. They had a tour and a banquet each year, and these commemorative juice glasses were given out. And maybe some of you old-timers out there may have one of these. I understand they're quite collectible, but you can't have this one. Speaking of cattle, it may also surprise you to know that when Artis, my wife, and I moved to Bowling Green in 1934, we kept several dairy cows in a barn we rented from a neighbor. It was Guernsey cows. That was good, rich milk. And some chickens, too. So even in the Depression, we had milk, eggs, and good fried chicken to eat. Now, I know, a county agricultural agent having some cows and some chickens, that's probably not a surprise to you. But here's the thing that you may not have been aware of. When we moved to Bowling Green, we moved to South College Avenue, and we were located less than a block away from the BGSU campus. I doubt raising livestock in Bowling Green would be allowable today. And I'm really honored to be able to show you a little of my life with you. My wife, Artis, and I were honored when our children, Jean Toms and William Stewart, established a scholarship in our name, and in our memory, at Ohio State University. It is known as the CB and Artis Stewart Scholarship, and it's given each year to a Wood County 4-H member who is attending Ohio State University. I don't know how many of these have been given out, but I hope these scholarships will continue forever. And again, thank you for inviting me today to share a little of my life and profession as a county agent.
Thank you, CB. Can I ask all of you to come around here and just kind of make a line out here so you can take a final bow? Thank you for coming. Here's my cast. All right. Yeah, thank you. If any of you are a teacher today or was a teacher at some time or other, please raise your hand. How many teachers do we have? And I can put my hand up for this one too. Thank you so much for the work that you have done on behalf of students and everybody in Wood County. You probably have a favorite teacher during your time at school, somebody who had a profound impact and helped make you decide what you were going to do with your life. If that's the case, please share that story with your family and friends. So often, the teachers don't really get enough credit for all the work that they do. And all of you who are teachers know what I'm talking about. Okay? So we need to spread the word and say teachers are important. Without good teachers in the schools and in other places throughout Wood County and the country would be in a very sad shape. We need to educate people. That's what teachers do. So once again, let us give thanks to educators, all of them. We look forward to seeing you again next year for our 22nd Living History program, which will probably be right here. In the meantime, there is a display going on in the museum. I think this was already announced, so you're free to step in there and see what's going on inside the building, or you can wander around and look what's around here, or you can listen to the traffic over there, whatever. Okay? But I want to thank you once again for coming. We enjoyed sharing our stories with you, and we hope to see you again for future programs. Thank you very much.